All right. Thanks for tuning in to another stream by yours truly, Sigma Jones, courtesy of YouTube. First and foremost, just want to give a shout out to the subscribers out there. Thanks for listening in. Thanks for tuning in. I truly appreciate the love and support. Hope you guys and ladies are doing well out there on this Saturday night, Sunday morning, wherever you are around the globe. So, you guys are in for another treat. This is a solo stream where yours truly, Sigma Jones, is going to do a little bit of teaching, something educational. There's some things that kind of came down the pipe. Well, first and foremost, I wasn't even planning to do a stream this weekend. I was planning to take the weekend off to kind of rest up a bit, and mainly this whole month I didn't really have much planning coming forth as far as latest shows and everything. But something came down the pipe that I simply couldn't ignore off bat. So I said, you know what? This would be a good opportunity to do a solo stream and to kind of give my input in some form of educational manner to where the brothers out there, the competent brothers for sure, could be a little bit more informed and be able to make their choices in the world. So before I get into the meat of this particular stream, just want to make a few announcements on the War Room and the Black Ronins coming up. So as far as with the War Room, we do have another stream coming up on December the 18th. And this particular stream, we are now going to be looking into the early life of Il Duce, also known as Benito Mussolini. So I'm definitely looking forward to that stream. I've always been curious about the early years of Mussolini. Um, I would not be surprised if his background growing up has similar backgrounds compared to the likes of Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Winston Churchill. You know, three of those names that we've already covered so far in the War Room series. So coming up next is definitely going to be Benito Mussolini. So you all that are fans of World War II and everything related to World War II, you're definitely going to enjoy that episode coming up. And then next for the Black Ronins of Japan. So I kind of have good news and bad news. So I'll go ahead and start off with the bad news. So there will not be an episode of the Black Ronins this month in December. However, this brings on the good news. The reason being there won't be an episode this December, this month, is because we have an interview lined up for the upcoming episode of Black Ronins. And that episode is scheduled for January the 2nd, 2021. And actually, our guest, he is located in Japan. And so when he interviews, it will be January the 3rd, 2021 in Japan. So, yep. That will be the latest episode coming up for the Black Ronins. Instead of being for this month, we were able to have it scheduled for January. So it will be the first thing rolling out right after the New Year's. So we're definitely going to get the year started with a bang. And just to let you know, too, we also have other interviews starting to line up for the Black Ronin series. So we will definitely let you know on any updates of that coming down the pipe. But without further ado, those are the two updates and announcements I wanted to let you guys in, so that way you're not left in the dark. So without further ado, let's get into this. So, like I said before, I originally did not plan to do a stream tonight. I was mainly just going to focus on some relaxation, kind of hit up some of my buddies, here in America and over in Japan, kind of check in on them, see how they were doing. Of course, to check up with my girl and whatnot. But I've kind of been hearing some troublings. I wouldn't say troublings, but something coming down the pipe through the grapevine. And so I've kind of been hearing these talks that there are detractors who are stating that there is no difference between American women and foreign women when you're traveling abroad. Or in other words, they want to say that what's the point of traveling abroad when other countries are just like America? In other words, they're trying to say that it's one and the same. And they're pretty much trying to say that all women act the same, no matter if they're Western born, American born, or they're foreign, non-Western. And hearing this particular talking points through the grapevine, I said to myself, you know what, Sigma Jones, this would be a perfect opportunity to do a teachable moment, I would say, to kind of educate as far as the main brothers and competent brothers who already know what I'm going to be talking about, but just for the newcomers who may be listening in, and obviously some detractors who, will watch from behind the scenes and whatnot. So I figured, you know what, as a person of science, as a man who loves to look at things from the logical standpoint and to see if it makes sense through math and science, I said, you know what, this will be a great teachable moment. So, start off, let me present to you a meme. Oh, wow. Wasn't expecting it to do that. Let me stop share. All that flashing. Oh, let's try this. Okay, let's try again. There we go. That's much better. So, what inspired this meme? Like I said, there's now talks amongst the detractors and kind of some of these so-called dating coaches, people who claim that they know about female nature and everything. They want to say that there is no difference between American women and women who are not from America. And I have to say that is just completely ingenuous, to say the least. It just makes no sense to sit up here and say that when it comes down to women, there is no difference between American women and women from other cultures. You're pretty much saying there is no such thing as culture. Let's just be honest. People who try to make this argument, they try to say that, so to speak, no matter where you go, no matter what countries you visit or what countries you immigrate to and all, the women will always be the same. And like I said, it's very disingenuous, to say the least, to make that assumption, because it clearly shows that whatever type of man who's making that assumption is clearly not a man who has been outside of his neighborhood, let alone outside of his city, outside of the state, and most definitely outside the country. So, before I go any further, shout out to Ace and Evan Duncan in the chat rooms and all. Shout out to Bruce, Jermaine, Penny Stock Investor, Shozan Hanma, Liam Johnson, Abdullah, JJ Wilson, shout out to him as well. So again, like I said, completely disingenuous to make that assumption. So I said, okay, let's break this down scientifically and let's prove for the brothers out there who are competent and who think rationally, this will just be a confirmation stream to let you know that no, you're not thinking crazy. No, you're not an outsider or black sheep. There are many other brothers who think along the same lines that, you know what, culture makes a difference. It completely does. So, I figured, okay, what would be the best method to break down this myth and to break down this argument? Well, one such method that I love to use is the scientific method. And so, one particular method or debate that has recently been highlighted by David Carroll, shout out to him, is the debate of nature versus nurture. And to me, when it comes down to these talks about cultures and personalities and genetics and what have you, nature versus nurture pretty much helps sets the standards of, okay, this is what we know for it to be true, and this is what we know to make no particular sense. So before we get started, let's first give you an idea of what is nature versus nurture. So let me first get my system set up. There we go. And then next. Alrighty. You know what? Hold up a second. Okay. Now let's break it back up. There we go. Alright, so I'm not going to go through this whole article, but I am going to give the basis of what the nature versus nurture debate is all about. So this article, titled The Age-Old Debate of Nature versus Nurture from verywellmind.com, pretty much says this about nature versus nurture. It says, the nature versus nurture debate is one of the oldest philosophical issues within psychology and other studies of science. So what exactly is it all about? Well, nature refers to all of the genes and hereditary factors that influence who we are, from our physical appearance to our personality characteristics. Meanwhile, nurture refers to all the environmental variables that impact who we are, including our early childhood experiences, how we were raised, our social relationships, and our surrounding culture. Hint, hint. Even today, different branches of psychology often take a one versus the other approach. For example, the biological psychology tends to stress the importance of genetics and biological influences. Behaviorism, on the other hand, focuses on the impact that the environment has on behavior. In the past, debates over the relative contributions of nature versus nurture often took a very one-sided approach, with one side arguing that nature played the most important role, and the other side suggested that it is nurture that was the most significant. Today, most experts recognize that both factors play a critical role. Not only that, but they also realize that nature and nurture interact in important ways all throughout life. So that's the gist of nature versus nurture. And how it is utilized not only in psychology, but pretty much within the scientific world. How it helps to determine what is something that is genetic and that it is common amongst a species versus something that is behavioral and that doesn't happen very often amongst the species. So I figured, okay, let's do a little exercise so I could give you examples of what is something that is genetic versus what is something that is behavioral. So I present to you Exhibit A. So, as you can see, this is a picture of a Dalmatian, a certain type of dog breed. So, what makes Dalmatians differ from other dog breeds? Well, Dalmatians are the only type of dog breeds who have black or brown dots over their white furred coats. In other words, that is what makes Dalmatians unique as a breed. The fact that they are covered in black or brown dots. So, if we was to look at this from nature versus nurture, where would this fall on that debate? Well, most likely it would fall under nature. Why is that? Well, it's simple. A Dalmatian is not a Dalmatian if it does not have black or brown polka dots. Just as simple as that. You can intermix the breed with all other breeds of dogs. But if it does not have the physical requirements to be classified as a Dalmatian, one of them being black or brown dots on white fur coats, then it's simply not a Dalmatian. It's a different breed of dog. So again, this is a perfect example of something that is nature, something that is more in line with biology and genetics. So this is not something that is, so to speak, a trait or behavior in that matter. It is just simply, this is something that is genetic. So again, if a person comes up to you claiming that they have a Dalmatian, but yet the Dalmatian or the dog they show you does not have black or brown polka dots, then it's not a Dalmatian. It is a completely different dog breed. So again, perfect example of what is nature. Now, let me give you an example of what is nurture. So, time for a little storyline. And shout out to Seattle Show. Good to see you, sir. Ace said, interesting. I wonder when it comes to cultural and authentic women, does patriarchy play a role in it? We'll get to that later on. But in any case, little story time. So when I was just a little boy, my dad would actually take me to some of the rodeo events that would come into town. And one of my favorite rodeo events that I liked to watch as a kid was bull riding. Yeah, a black kid who liked watching bull riding is something that's not heard of. Just one moment. All right, sorry for that. Take care of a little business. So, like I said, my dad would take me to bull riding events when I was a kid. And so back in the 90s, there were some bull rider events that were called bull riders only and sometimes called professional bull riders, PBR. And at one of these events, there was a bull that was considered the most dangerous bull in all of rodeo, and he went by the name of Bodacious. So, before I get to it, Abdullah says, it's Dalmatian if it has two papers proving of his lineage, regardless of his dots. Yeah, Abdullah, but everybody knows that a Dalmatian is not a Dalmatian if it does not have black or brown dots. Even if papers prove that it has two black Dalmatian parents, genetically it would not be considered Dalmatian because of that genetic trait. So, anywho, so there is this bull by the name of Bodacious, and this bull had the title of the most dangerous bull in all of rodeo, bull riding whatsoever. So what made this bull famous is he was considered a headhunter. And I actually have a GIF that actually shows this particular bull in action. So this GIF is pretty small, but as you can see, this particular bull, he had a special type of trick to where as he would jump up and down, or as they call bucking, he would purposely move his body like a roller coaster. And so he would thrust his body forward to cause the bull rider to lean over his hump towards his head. And once he felt the bull rider lean over his hump, the bull will use his two front legs to push himself upwards, and the next thing you know, the bull rider's head and the bull's head, they just collide, and it was a massive collision. So, is this something genetic or behavioral? Well, to my knowledge, I have not seen any other bull who has bucked the same way as this bull, let alone you see the average bull if you go to any farm that would do something like this. So again, this would be classified as something under nurture. It's a learned behavior. Somehow this particular bull has learned this trick or behavior to where he would purposely roll his body forward like a wave or roller coaster, and as soon as he felt the bull rider over his hump, he would push his front legs forward or upwards and would literally try to smash the bull rider's head. No other bull has done anything similar to this beforehand or even afterwards. So again, this is something that is completely nurtured. It's not something you will ever see in regards to animal athletes within rodeos, let alone bull riding. And for those who are interested in learning more about this particular bull, just go on YouTube and type in Bodacious bull riding. There are so many videos of this particular bull. So yeah, when I was a kid, he was definitely a household name. He was kind of up there with the likes of, at the time in the 90s, he was pretty popular with the likes of Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods. Yeah, very well known. But okay, that is an example of nurture. So you saw an example of nature with the Dalmatian, and you saw an example of nurture in regards to a head hunting bull in the world of rodeo. So now let's take this in regards to women. All right. So the argument is that all women are the same. Okay? We'll take that argument at face value. That all women, no matter what race, ethnicity, or culture they come from, they all act the same. All right. So we're going to take that premise and stack it up against nature versus nurture. So, is this something that is nature? Well, there are some aspects when it comes down to attraction that is universal. For example, most women do prefer to be with a man who is taller than they are from a physical standpoint. So that is something that is permeate amongst women throughout all ages of time. From the caveman days up until now, women just instinctively prefer men who are physically taller than them. Now, why is that? Archaeologists and scientists would say that it's just something that is of an instinct. A man who is much taller than a woman, is perceived to be able to protect her better, and also perceived to be able to provide resources. So women just instinctively will go for men who were taller than them. Again, that's something that is universal, something that has been going on for ages and ages of time. But now, is that something that makes all women the same? If we was to judge that on one aspect, no, that does not make women all the same. Reason being is because just because a woman, no matter what country or culture, prefers a man who is taller than they are, does not mean that they all think the same way. There will be some women who, hey, they like short guys. There will be women who, hey, they want a guy who they can see on the same eye level as they. So, because of the fact that there are some women who prefer to have shorter guys or guys on the same height level, that concludes that that is not something that is genetic. Most likely, that is something that is cultural. So again, even though it is universal that most women prefer men who are taller than they are, that is still not something that is genetic. That is only something that you could say is culturally bound, or even you could say instinctively. So, with that being said, all right, so if we were to look at women across all races and culture, what would be something that shows that there is some distinction? Well, there is some stats that I pulled up from the US Census that might be helpful in this regard. And let's go ahead and go to that. And the links to some of these channels will be in the description box. All right, so this was a recent study that was just published this summer, June 1st, 2020, where it talks about the 48 divorce statistics, including divorce rates, race, and marriage length. Now, I'm not going to go through all the stats, but there is two sections that I want to highlight from this particular study. And so the first one is actually going to go down to education. All right, here we go. So it says here, in 2015, amongst adults ages 25 or older, 65% with a 4-year college degree were married. 55% of those with some college education, and then 50% amongst those with no education beyond high school. 25 years earlier, the marriage rate was above 60% for each of these groups. But check this out. Women with at least a 4-year college degree or higher have an 80% chance of being married for more than 20 years. Then it says women with a high school education or less have a 40% chance of being married for more than 20 years. In 2014, the Pew Research Center found that adults ages 25 and older in 2014, 65% of those with a bachelor's degree or more were married, compared with 53% of adults with less education. So here's some discrepancy right here. It shows that women who come from a well-to-do educational background appears to be able to stay married longer, at least most of the time, shown here as 80%, versus the women who have a high school education or less. So again, this already proves that not all women are the same. But there will be some who will argue that, well, we have groups of women who are the most educated. Okay, sure. You have a group of women who are the most educated, but yet they also are the ones less likely to be married. Well, why is that? Well, this is where the next stat comes in. And this is one that really blows things out of the water. Salute to Sir Anthony. Good to see you, sir. So the next stat is going to talk about ethnicity. What is the divorce rate? Move this back up. Thank you. What is the divorce rate by ethnicity? And this is something that not many folks actually likes to talk about, because this actually highlights nature versus nurture. So check this out. Marriage rates vary significantly across race and ethnicity. In 2015, 54% of white adult women ages 18 and older were married. 60% of Asian American women were married. 46% of Hispanics were married. And then last but not least, 30% of African American women were married. While Asians at 29% and Hispanics at 27%, newlyweds were more likely to intermarry in the U.S. The most dramatic increases in intermarriage have occurred amongst black newlyweds, where 18% of who married someone of a different race or ethnicity, up from 5% in 1980. About 1 in 10 white newlyweds, 11%, are married to someone of a different race or ethnicity. So, it asks, how does race impact marriage and divorce? Ethnicity can also be a predictor of divorce. Check this out. Asian Americans are the least likely to get divorced of all, with an estimated of 18% of Asian American women and 16% of Asian American men experiencing at least one divorce in their lifetime. Next up are those of Spanish, Hispanic, Latino descent, among whom about 30% of the women and 27% of the men will experience divorce. Caucasian Americans fall right in the middle, with 38% of white women and 36% of white men going through divorce at least once in their lifetime. Black men and women both experience at least one divorce at a rate of 42%. Finally, Native Americans were the highest statistical risk of experiencing divorce, with 44% of the men and 45% of the women ultimately ending one or more marriages. Now, what I want to highlight is this stat includes all marriages, whether it's monoracial marriages or interracial marriages. These are the numbers that they are pulling from all marriages on average. So, if we were to look at these numbers, and we're just looking at from the women's perspective, Asian women divorce at a rate of 18%. Hispanic, Latina women divorce at a rate of 30%. Caucasian, white women divorce at a rate of 38%. And then black women come at a rate of 42%, only being topped by Native American women at 45%. So, I want you brothers just to think on this particular question. Now, I do understand that not all men are interested in marriage. And if you ask me, that's a good thing. As long as you are responsible and you're not being irresponsible, just laying with women all around the world, getting them pregnant and everything, I applaud you. I applaud you for being responsible. But for those men who are thinking about marriage and who are thinking about something at the very least long term, these are the numbers you definitely want to pay attention to. And keep in mind, these are numbers from within America. If you were to pull up numbers for foreign marriages or immigrants that immigrate into America, their divorce rates are much, much lower. So again, if we were to look at these numbers, Asian women 18%, Hispanic women 30%, white women 38%, black women 42%, Native American women 45%. If I am a competent ebony American man and I'm seriously considering marriage for the long term, as far as wife and kids, at the very least, these numbers I will have to take into consideration. You just have to. Keep in mind, there are other factors that go into probabilities of divorce too. But if we were to look at this from an ethnicity and cultural standpoint, these numbers cannot be easily dismissed. You have to take these numbers into consideration. And if we were to look at these numbers from a cultural standpoint, then again, this does prove that the myth about all women are the same is just that. It's simply a myth. So, those numbers I definitely wanted to highlight. I wanted to show the fact that, okay, for those brothers who are thinking about marriage and everything, and especially those who considerably want to leave a legacy, these are numbers they have to take into consideration. And for the detractors and the naysayers who say that all women are the same, there is no difference and whatnot, then again, show me the evidence. Show me where all women get divorced at the same rate amongst ethnicities and cultures. Because I can tell you right now, looking at those numbers that I just presented, it's going to be hard to convince me otherwise. But we're not done yet. Still got more coming down the pipe. So next up is a study that I've recently done that talks about interracial marriages and divorces. And I am going to pull this up as well. All right. So these were some findings that were done in a study by the U.S. Census in 2002, as well as the Center of Disease Control. And I'm not going to go through the whole article, but I am going to highlight a few sections of this particular study. So I'm actually going to start at this paragraph. Excuse me. It says, moreover, members of interracial pairings are more likely to have traits correlated with a higher probability of divorce. However, these studies fail to account for gender in connection with the race of each individual in interracial marriages. A recent study published by the National Council on Family Relations explored this aspect in interracial couples in the United States. Using data from the 2002 National Survey of Family Growth, the study analyzed almost 6,000 men and women between the ages of 15 and 44 who had never been married over a period of 10 years. The study found that, number one, marriages between a black husband and a white wife were twice as likely to divorce as marriages involving a white husband and a white wife. However, when adjusted for background aspects such as age at marriage and educational level, differences between black male, white female marriages and white male, white female marriages virtually disappeared in some cases. This suggests that, contrary to prior findings, the higher rate of interracial divorce between black male, white female marriages is not due to background factors. So what does that mean? That simply means that if you was to create the ideal background to where the pairings between black men and white women were ideal, their marriage rates would actually, their divorce rates, would actually drop. And their marriages would be on the same level as monoracial marriages. So if we scroll down a little bit, I want to highlight this particular paragraph. It says, this study seems to both contradict and confirm popular beliefs about gender, race, and marriages. Divorce determinants within an interracial marriage make it more likely that a couple will divorce. These determinants include cohabitation before marriage, having grown up in a single parent homes, hint hint, lack of religion, previous marriages, and childlessness. Each of these factors make divorce more likely for the interracial couple. But check this out. Married between the ages of 21 and 49, the woman having been foreign born and a higher level of education are factors that reduce the rate of divorce for interracial couples. Shout out to Soul Provider Speaks. Good to see you, sir. Okay, I want to highlight that information that I just gave you. So what are determinant factors for the likelihood of divorce amongst an interracial couple? Well, what it lists there is cohabitation before marriage and having grown up in a single parent home, lack of religion, previous marriages, and childlessness. This is one of the reasons why I say SYSBM is not for every black man. Because, especially for ebony men in America. And the reason I say that is because, unfortunately, there is a good amount of black ebony men who come from dysfunctional backgrounds. So, of course, they're going to have a hard time maintaining, let alone getting, in an interracial coupling. Shout out to SKC. Good to see you, sir. But now, what are the determinant factors that will help reduce the likelihood of an interracial marriage getting a divorce? According to this study, as long as you marry between the ages of 21 and 49, so, or in other words, you don't marry too old, but you also don't marry too young, the woman coming from a non-American background, and both parties having higher levels of education, so I'm assuming at least some college studies or above, greatly reduce the chances of a divorce happening amongst interracial couples. And believe me, this even holds true for ebony men who interracially marry. So again, this myth that all women are the same, it is simply just that. It is a myth. Any person, male or female, who tells you that all women act the same, they are being completely disingenuous. They literally do not know what they're talking about. And in fact, I would question them, okay, can you show proof of the places you have been to outside of America? And even then, the places you have been to outside of America, have you been to cultural places? We're not talking bars and clubs. We're talking historical places, historical countries, places that have cultures that have been around for thousands and thousands of years. Keep in mind, I keep trying to tell certain detractors and even a few learners that America, in the eyes of the world, is a very young country. Its culture is considered babies in the eyes of other countries. So we haven't even hit the 300 mark as far as being a country. Meanwhile, you have countries like the United Kingdom, been around for thousands of years. Japan, thousands of years. Germany, at least hundreds of years. Millennials at that. China, thousands of years. Countries in South America, some of them thousands of years. Again, we're talking about countries who have a history of culture, who have a history of their aspects of culture lasting hundreds and even thousands of years. And you still going to tell me that all women are the same? And speaking of which, on that same vein, you have some detractors when talking about women. They would say that women from other cultures do the same thing as American women. Perfect example, the term twerking or twerk. You will even have some detractors who would say that there are women from other cultures who do just as much twerking as women here in America. Okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go on YouTube when you get a chance. And I want you to put in the search bar twerk or twerking. And the first 10 videos, I want you to look and see what is the culture of that woman. I will tell you right now, most likely you will find a video in regards to that term twerking. Most likely all of the videos you look at least 90% of them, are going to be videos of American women twerking. And then, if you want to get even more serious, if you were to look at the ethnicity of the women who do the twerking, most likely it will be an individual who come from an ebony background. Or in the words of mass bus driver, they are a daggle. So again, twerking, just go on YouTube, type in that word in the search bar, and literally see what kind of women are posting those videos. What culture do they come from? What country are these videos, particular videos, are coming from? I guarantee you, 90% of the time, these are American women doing that type of dance. Logic Finest, my co-host for the War Room, he says, as a unified state, Germany is about 200 years old. The various German states, empires, and cultures go back at least 2,000 years. The Goths and the Gauls before them are today's Germans. See, there you have it. So Germany as a unified state is roughly around 200 years old. But if you was to look at the German Empire and the culture itself, at least more than 2,000 years. You mean to tell me that 2,000 years can somehow be changed within, I don't know, less than 150 years? Nah, not likely to happen. But anywho, so the argument that I hear is that there are women from other cultures who do twerking. It's like, okay, well, if we're talking about shaking one's booty, trying to be politically correct, let me show you what that will look like from a more cultured background. And so let me just say this is fair use, and this is mainly just for educational purposes. But I want to show y'all what actually would be considered booty dancing from a cultured background. So first up, let me show you a group of women from the land of the rising sun who let's just say that they understand what it means to do the whole term booty shaking in a more proper manner. So, without further ado, we'll just watch a short clip of this. Okay, so let me ask the audience, press 1 if that is a dance of a cultured environment, or press 2 if you firmly believe that dance is the same as twerking. So before I go any further, I just want to see what you guys are thinking. Press 1 if that is more of a cultured dance. Press 2 if that's the same as twerking. All right, I'm seeing some numbers coming through, and so far I'm seeing a lot of ones. Let's see. A said, from the results I saw so far, news from Dallas twerking incident, a YouTube channel on the subject, and Western women, especially black women. Well, there you go. And then my friend and good sir, JJ Wilson, says that video should have more than 2,000 views. I would agree. I would agree. All right. So far I see a total of 6 ones. So far from what the audience is telling me, that the hula dances that they just witnessed, that is different compared to twerking. So thankfully you guys are seeing what I'm seeing, and you're definitely showing that you are most certainly are a cultured man. But you may have detractors that say, okay, that's just one example of women from another culture who shake their booties in a more cultured fashion. There's other cultures that probably do the same type of twerking. Okay. All right. You still need some more evidence. Not a problem. The next video I'm going to show you is a video from a pageant for Miss India back in 2018. And this particular video is mainly focusing on belly dancing or belly dancers. So without further ado, let me show you Exhibit C. All right. So that is an example of belly dancers from India. So once again, I will ask you, the audience, the question. Put 1 in the chat if the belly dancers from India have their own unique cultured dance. Or press 2 if you firmly believe that the belly dancers from India are no different than the American twerkers. So again, press 1 if the belly dancers are cultured in the way they express themselves, or press 2 if their belly dancing is no different than twerking. Let's see. Sir Anthony says he likes exhibit number 2. Oh yeah, I concur. Ace says that's majestic indeed. That is definitely got the audience more attention, or should I say, a more cultured audience attention. D-Max says, I dated a belly dancer, or at least we were talking and conversing. That is a performance art, and that's how she literally took it. Very serious about it. Indeed, indeed. All right, so looking at the numbers that are coming in, at the moment, I see a total of 8 ones. So again, it appears that the brothers have spoken, that indeed this is more of a cultured dancing and not a simple matter of a mating call. Alrighty. A says, in continuation of my research, I found one Muslim girl twerking, but it is completely different than Western women's. Probably. I will say when I did the YouTube search, the majority of the twerking videos I saw, now I will say, is not just, so to speak, an ebony thing. Because I know some detractors say, well, twerking, there's other races of women that do twerking and whatnot. Yes, I get that. And when you do a YouTube search, yes, there are other races of women who happen to do twerking. But when you look at just the thumbnails of those videos, it's very, very obvious that the women who are doing those particular videos are, at the very least, they're westernized. At most, they smell like they came from America. So again, observations. Whereas when you go to other cultures and look at their forms of dancing, as I just presented to you, it is more dignified, I would say. And it especially leaves a lot of desire in a more productive manner. So again, the whole concept and notion that all women are the same, I'm sorry, that argument is just not holding up, especially when you look at how women conduct themselves from a dancing standpoint in other cultures. I just don't see it that way. But now, enough about as far as those myths about all women are the same. Now let's look at the myth of, well, if brothers travel to other countries and all, it's not going to change any differences from them. The people are just going to treat them the same. They're just going to be get treated just like they were in America, whatnot. Again, clearly it's the sound of an individual who has never stepped foot outside of their neighborhood, outside of their city, outside of their state, and most certainly outside of their country. But don't let me tell you that. I recently found an article that is actually a blog posted by a brother who talks about how traveling can actually help save the lives of African Americans, particularly African American men. And when I was reading this article, which dates back to 2015, it was like, wow, this brother is actually pretty insightful. And I'm surprised I was able to find it myself. And so we'll read a little bit about it. This brother, he posted this blog talking about the traveling mechanisms that help save the lives of African American men. And I find it pretty interesting. So I'll go ahead and start reading. He says, I recently received an email with a news link from my hometown. Click. My heart sank a bit. My younger brother was arrested and is being charged with multiple felonies. At this point, it's likely my brother will be sent to prison for some time. Over the years, I've repeatedly cautioned my siblings on this ridiculous hood logic, get-rich-quick schemes. Yet here we are. Him sitting in a jail cell, and me sitting on a beach in Bali. Where did our paths diverge? My brother and I are 1 year apart in age. Although he's a very intelligent and compassionate person, he never could escape the grasp of our upbringing in an environment that's purely toxic. Again, keep in mind, I want you to read this article from the lens of nature versus nurture. One that never showed us what we could be, but highlighted what we weren't. An environment that feels the life of a young black man and less than that of an animal. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, 1 in 3 black men can expect to go to prison in their lifetime. A report by the Department of Justice found that blacks and Hispanics were approximately 3 times more likely to be searched during a traffic stop than white motorists. African Americans were twice as likely to be arrested and almost 4 times as likely to experience the use of force during encounters with the police. It would appear that the worth of a black man's life can be measured in however they can serve the corporatized prison system. If one thinks Mike Brown, Eric Gardner, and Tamir Rice are anomalies, think again. There is a system of marginalization in place that not only harms young black men, but prevents the U.S. from delivering on its promises of upward mobility and opportunities. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that the problems facing young black men are entirely external. That would be disingenuous and unhelpful. I'm not the most militant of us, and personally don't feel that the marginalization of black men in America will change anytime soon. So what's to be done to ensure a future for our young black men? Addressing the shortcomings with our communities and teaching of young black men is the only way to save them. Travel is the world's best education. Below, I will detail what I believe to be some of the primary lessons of young men that our young men can learn. So here's a brother, the same author, who is scuba diving. He says, young black men are often depicted as violent, irrational by Western media. Although this is largely inaccurate, we do tend to place a high value on violence. Being hard and gangster are traits we often promote and attempt to emulate. Oftentimes, our quick reactions can lead to life-altering and sometimes deadly consequences. Many young men's lives have ended or been negatively impacted because of misguided emotional reactions. Traveling solo as a black man teaches you that there is a time and place for controlled aggression. That anger never makes a situation better and is largely a pointless emotion. Traveling solo teaches you to control your emotions, both positive and negative. When removed from a position of comfort, your familiar, one begins to analyze his actions more thoroughly. Now, allowing your emotional state to be dictated by the actions of others is one of the most important things young black men need to learn. Here's the author again, or maybe a different brother who's in Thailand. You're more than sports and music. Mainstream media and people around us tend to push these two endeavors on us. We are much more than that. When young black men are told we have two choices and fail to become successful at either, it eats our self-esteem. It tells us we aren't good enough. When young black men are marginalized, beaten, and killed by the people who are supposed to protect us, what message is being sent? That we're worthless. The life of a young black man is only worth what the cooperativized prison population says it is. I say bullcrap to that. Travel opens our minds to a world of worth, a world that values our contribution to the arts, medicine, and diplomacy. Exploration of more history, the evolution of jazz abroad, and cultural exchange programs show how valued we are globally. Travel builds a sense of accomplishment that so many young black men lack. Self-esteem is the foundation of a well-rounded individual, black or otherwise. Gang relations largely come from a hive mind mentality, one that becomes pervasive in those who choose not to or can't think for themselves because they don't feel they can. Travel empowers young black men to make choices for themselves and allows them to become far less susceptible to the control of destructive forces. We don't instill basic discipline in our young black men anymore. During the civil rights movement, we learned the importance of not only public discipline in the image of peaceful protests, but personal as well. Young black men were expected to speak respectfully, show up on time, and the importance of keeping our word. Unfortunately, through the degradation of the black family, that's rarely the case anymore. When I speak of discipline, I don't mean blindly following rules. I mean having the personal control to do what needs to be done, what it needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and how it needs to be done. Discipline needs to be applied in all aspects of life. If we aren't disciplined while traveling, the world will soon show itself to be a harsh place. If you don't get to your train on time, the train will leave and the world will keep spinning. Show up on time. If you decide to spit on the sidewalk of Singapore, you will be arrested. Don't break the law. Being a person of your word will create lasting relationships all over the world. Do what you say. Many won't want to hear this, but as young black men, we come from a racist, homophobic, and misogynist community. We're taught to not like or trust whites, which I can understand. There is quite a bit of mistrust there. The media teaches us that Arabs are terrorists and Italians gangsters. Hence why so many black rappers take up Italian street names, Capone and Gotti. Homosexuality has largely been seen as a degradation of our community, and women are treated like sexual objects in 90% of our music videos. Tyler James Williams, a phenomenal young black actor, recently spoke on the mass hatred he received from the black community for his portrayal of a gay man in Dear White People, a film that explores racial dynamics on college campus. These people clearly missed the point. Our community perpetuates the cycle of marginalization without realizing it. Young black men will learn how to live, interact with, and respect people from all cultures and backgrounds through exposure. Young black men have been largely miseducated, misrepresented, and misinformed. And lack of access and exposure has created this internal struggle within them. By nature, people are accepting and kind. By conditioning, we become bigoted, fearful, and combative. Solo travel begins to bridge the gap between human nature and conditioning for young black men. Sir Anthony says, great author, but the writer definitely is not red pill. Some would say, but he has his points. I'll attempt not to marginalize anyone's struggle, my own included here. But something we need to realize in the US is that we don't hold a monopoly on oppression. Young black men can only truly understand what racism and discrimination are when you see it from the outside and the inside. We need to understand that systemic racism is real and pervasive in our world. That genocides are happening in Africa now. That racist policies in the Dominican Republic is setting Haitians back generations. Young black men need to see the struggles in order to put their own perspective. Racism and classism aren't only African American problems, they're global issues. Young black men need to see what others have done with less, what true poverty is. The U.S. poverty line is luxury compared to the slums of Rio, India, Haiti, and Poland. Our community is poor, yes, but we also have massive resources in the U.S. to lift ourselves out of said poverty, even though we're largely marginalized. The opportunity is there. Many around the world can't say the same. International travel will expose young black men to places that have a community of multiculturalism. Sarajevo is an example of Christian, Muslims, blacks, whites, and Arabs living side by side in an effort to preserve their history and culture. We have to see what our community can be if we put forth the effort not only to better ourselves, but the people around us also. International travel shows young black men that we are all part of a mutual struggle regardless of race, religion, gender, or nationality. There are courageous struggles all around the world that we don't know about. Exposure to other heroes and other causes help us to better understand our own and realize we are not alone. And see, these are young brothers snowing somewhere. Oh, how the world wants to see you. I can't explain the enthusiasm when a 14-year-old Chinese student finally gets to meet a real-life black man. We're like unicorns globally, a very rare find. And that needs to change. Many other journalists of color have taken me to task for saying this, but let me reiterate this point. African American men don't travel. A few Facebook groups do not trend make. Statistically speaking, African American men make up a very small percentage of Americans that travel internationally. Americans that travel internationally in general are already a small group, with only 31% of us even having a passport. The media representation of young black men is false and racist. We're often depicted as ignorant criminals, good only for sports. The world needs to see many more young black men to understand what our culture truly is, that we aren't all thugs, that we are intelligent and capable of great things. And it starts with our community realizing that far-reaching benefits travel has for our young black men. I'm speaking to all the young black men reading this. If you take nothing away from this article, but this piece of advice, I feel I achieved something. The best souvenir you can get from travel, regardless of your race or socioeconomic status, is a better understanding of yourself and of those you thought you knew. It's important for you to evolve beyond just being black or American, but to become a citizen of the world, to understand your place in the human species and what you can do to improve the future for others. Only then can you truly reach the potential ingrained in each and every one of you. And that is the end of the article, with a lot of images of brothers all across the globe. So, what is my take on that article? Definitely, I will say, even though I don't agree 100% of some of the things he mentioned in the article, but I will say, in regards to traveling, and especially being an ebony man traveling, he is 100% spot on. To me, the type of men that I have met who are able to travel, they just see themselves differently compared to ebony men who, I would say, keep themselves within the American borders. For some reason, ebony men who have not traveled, let alone have been to places within America, they're very closed minded. In some form of way, they're closed minded. They may say that they're thinking black men and whatnot, but a true competent man, especially one who travels on a regular basis, maybe not now because of COVID, but even before COVID and definitely afterwards, they just see life from a very different standpoint. They're not caught up in a lot of the troubles and stereotypes of America. You know, they're able to go to other cultures and countries and literally become part of those cultures and countries. That in and of itself shows a huge difference in mindsets. Abu says he remembers the Turks being happy to meet him. Hey, I concur. I can't tell you the stories of some Japanese people that I've met in college who I was the very first black person they have ever met. And even when I traveled to Japan, there were countless encounters of Japanese people that I have met from social gatherings where literally the only other black person they have met or seen was through television or through the computer. I was the first one that they actually met in person. And what makes it even better is just by meeting me in person, I literally changed their whole understanding and perspective of African Americans just by meeting me. So again, brothers who travel and are of culture mindsets, they just do things differently. They're not caught up in the troubles of America, let alone the troubles of the world. And I'm not saying that to talk down on the issues that goes on in America, but I am saying that when you put your mindset on a totally different level, when you elevate your thinking and you start thinking on a more cultural level, life is just different. And this is why I titled this stream that culture matters. It really does. And so when you mention, or when I hear some detractors saying that all women are the same or all other cultures are just the same as American cultures and all, it literally shows me that's an individual who does not have a clue of what it means to live in other cultures. Now, before I leave, and before I end the stream, I definitely want to show this picture. This is a young brother holding a passport. And I like the fact that he's thinking. Now, what is he thinking? Who knows? It's based off of the interpretation of the person who's viewing this picture. Now, if you was to ask the opinion of Sigma Jones, I would think this brother is thinking, what other places will I go to next? Or what other people would I get to meet on my next travel? What other places will I visit? what other cultures would I experience? What other fun activities would I be able to live and experience now that I have a passport, or now that I got this passport in my hands? Logic Finder says all stereotypes are based in some amount of truth. It's just a matter of the specific amount of truth. And a certain demographic blends over backwards to validate the very worst stereotypes. That, I agree. Sir Anthony says he's thinking, my nickname is Sigma Jones. Maybe. But I will say this brother in this picture, knowing that he now has a passport and he now has the keys to the world, as they would say, the opportunities are endless for this young brother. And if anything, I want young brothers and even older brothers who are listening in on the stream, I want you to put yourself in this guy's shoes. And even if you don't have a passport, I want you to make it your business that once this COVID thing is under control, that you're going to make it your business to go and get your passports. And that you're going to be able to go out and travel the world and see things from a totally different perspective. Sure, the naysayers would say that everybody are the same and that there's no difference between America and other cultures and all. They will say that, but can they say that from a standpoint of experience? Again, the article that I just read to you says that the average American, only 30% of them have a passport. And even amongst ebony folks, that number is smaller. And then if you look at amongst ebony black men or ebony men, that number is even smaller. So when you have a person telling you that all cultures are the same or all women are the same, are they really saying that from a standpoint of experience? Have they actually have the fortitude of going to these other cultures and spending time and time and time in these other cultures, that they can tell you with a straight face that, yeah, they're all the same. Yeah, there's no difference among them. Yeah, they're going to see you just like the Americans see you as an ebony person. Can they honestly say that? I wouldn't take their word for it. And this is why I preach to a lot of young black men. Go out there and create your own experiences. Get your passport. Find a country on the global map that you have never been to. And just make plans to go and see that country for yourself. Make plans that you're going to network with not only the women, but even the men from those cultures, from those countries. So that way, as soon as your plane lands in that country, and as soon as you step foot, you pretty much are already a culture man. And you know exactly what type of experiences you're going to make for yourself. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would say that is the end of the stream. I want to thank you all for listening in. As JJ Wilson just said, customize your life, as one fellow YouTuber say. Exactly. My sentiments exactly. So with that being stated, I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight or this morning, depending on where you are in the world. Thanks for listening in on the stream. If anything, not just for black men, but even for some of the audience out there that are non-black, I encourage you at the end of this pandemic, definitely get your passport and definitely make plans to travel the world. You will never know how much life will pass you by if you don't take the time out of your day to say, you know what? I want to travel overseas. I want to travel to this particular country or that particular country. I want to see what the world is like outside of books, outside of television, outside of computers and smartphones and gadgets. I want to literally experience that within the five senses of my body. And believe me, it is truly a beautiful thing. So, with that being stated, I'm Sigma Jones. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, this is the way.